welcome to you guys that are in person and welcome to you guys that are on Zoom. So for the people on Zoom, just a reminder, well, a couple things for the people on Zoom. First off is I need you to put your name and your license number in the chat box, if you will, so that I have a record of that. So we're going to be doing these classes. There's 6 segments for the 12-hour new agent. And I don't need your license every single time, but I do need it at least once. So if for some reason you guys that are on Zoom don't have it handy, that's fine. You could put it in one of the next classes or whatever. So, but anyway, but just for sure though, make sure your first and last name is in there, and preferably how it appears on your license so that I have a record of that. So anyway, because there are times, which this would go the same for you guys that are here in person too, but from time to time, I will have somebody that comes to some of the classes, but not all 6 of the classes to get the 12-hour new agent, their CE credit. And then a year later, they will send me an email and say, I know I went to all the classes. And so the way that I will decide, or really, I shouldn't say decide, the way I verify is going back to if they were on Zoom, did they put it in the chat box or did they sign in here? So just make sure that you do that each time. So again, also just as a reminder that today is the first of the classes for the 12-hour new agent, and which will give you 12 hours of CE. And I know I put this in the email already, but I just have to say it because again, people get confused sometimes. This is a scenario where you either get 12 hours of CE or you'll get 0. So there's no in between. You either get 12 hours or you get 0 hours. So you have to attend all 6 of the classes. And then at the end of that, you'll get the 12 hours of core CE as part of the new agent. So for those that have gotten their license within the last 2 years, this is required that you do it during the first 2 years. Everybody else, you don't have to do it, but it'll get you 12 hours of CE. So anyway, yes.
Have they been like that the whole time? Because I have taken like classes here and there.
So I do have a spreadsheet that I keep track of, so I would know.
Okay, I didn't know before that they have to be like, you start and you have to go all the way through. Like I thought I could take 1 year.
Well, you actually can do that. You
Okay,
can.
because I just wanted to know like if the ones that I have taken so far, if they were not good.
Yeah, no, they still will count. Yeah. So in fact, but let me clarify on that. It has to be within a reasonable amount of time, meaning if somebody came to part of them and then a year later came back, then yeah, you'd probably have to do it all over.
Like it's just been like like this whole, it's been like
yeah.
Plans here and there.
Yep, I do have a spreadsheet that I keep track of.
Okay,
so trying to think of what other housekeeping things to tell you before we get started here. So
I think I'm in the same boat with Harry Rose. I think I have a few.
Probably.
But I'm trying to plug in the holes.
Yep, that's great. That works. So
which might not be today.
That's fine. So
sorry, I do have one more, but they usually go to like 12:30. Is that kind of how?
yeah, 12:30, 12:40, 12:45 ish.
12:45.
Yeah, no, we should be done by then. Should be good.
So Rose, I mean, I know that where I am in this spread paper that you have, but
you are
in case I have a good mistake because I have to. I mean, even if I don't get the credit, you are going to be putting it on the web. YouTube, right?
So yeah, great question. For you guys that are on Zoom, Luz was just asking if she had to leave, is this going to be on YouTube? Yes, but you only can, because it's a CE and you can't watch a recording of it and get credit.
Yeah.
So it has to be done live. So that's where Sam and everybody on Zoom, thumbs up, good job. That you have your cameras on, because that is one of the other requirements is we can do it on Zoom, but the camera has to be on and in front of your camera at all times. So anyway, good. What other questions? Yes. It is. So you'll get CE credit. And again, I think you came in after I had said this, but You'll get 12 hours of CE if you attend all 6 classes. If you miss the 1 or 2 though, then you get 0 CE. So it's all or nothing kind of a thing. So, yes.
Well, I'm just here for the information. I don't know if we get the CEO or not, which is okay. I just.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and occasionally we will, like last time I taught this, I had somebody that was on Zoom that wouldn't turn their camera on, and I kept saying, I can't give you credit if your camera's not on. I can't get, and finally she said, I'm not here for the CE, I'm just here for the information. In which case, great, then don't have your camera on. So.
Sorry, I have a question about that. So, sometimes I send to them from home, I'm there. So if you need the camera on, usually I'm like 12:30. I usually am still listening to you, but I go get my son from preschool really fast. So like if I'm in the car, is that okay? Like, do you want me to put on the camera, or like if I'm in the car, do you want?
Yeah,
to
unfortunately, the camera has, in order for me to
Okay.
give you CE credit, camera has to be on.
You knew that I was just
Sure.
trying to get my son coming back home, because I have two
Yep.
little kids and it's a.
Sure, yep, that works. All right, good. Any other questions before we get going here? Okay, well, so now with that, let me just give you some background and some reasoning behind how all this works. So what happened actually, and in fact, I don't think this is true, what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, even though I don't think it's true. But I like to think that the whole reason that the Division of Real Estate requires you to do this when you first get your real estate license, to do the 12-hour new agent course, I like to think it's because of me. And I don't believe that's really true, but I like to think that. And why I say that was before the division ever implemented this 12-hour new agent course, CE class, before they ever implemented that, I was teaching at a competitor to Century 21. I was teaching there, and I did what I called tech skills there, where what I would do is every Tuesday afternoon for 2 hours, I would spend time going through teaching agents how to do a CMA, teaching them about the buyer paperwork, the seller paperwork, and all that kind of stuff. And so I like to think that what happens is the division got word of it and decided we should cause that. Now, it's probably not true that that's what happened, but this part is true. So what happened though with me, of why I decided to start doing this and to get my license to be even a CE instructor, was because I had taught these classes the one day, and I had an agent who said, I can't come and be in your class today, this tech skills class that I had done. He said, because I have to go over to the board to do the 12-hour new agent class. And I said, oh, okay, that's fine. Just catch it the next go around or whatever. So, so what happened is the next time I saw this guy, I said, so how was the 12-hour new agent class that you went to? And he said, well, it was kind of boring. And I said, well, why was it boring? And he said, because it was all the same information you had already taught us. That's where I get this idea of saying, I think it's because of me that the division did this, which I know that's not true. But so as a result of that, I thought, well, I should go and get my CE instructor license. And then since I'm teaching this information anyway, I could then at the end of the class give you 12 hours of CE. So that's why I decided to go do it. Now, with that being said, the reason I tell you all that is because there are some things, though, that the division requires that we talk about. And for the most part, as we go through these 6 classes, I will point out to you the things that are like, okay, the division wants me to make sure that you guys are aware of this. And I'm going to start with that right now, actually, is what we're going to start this whole thing with, because prior to me getting approved to teach it, I didn't talk about what I'm about to talk about, which is fine. And I think it's probably good that we do have this conversation, but this is one of the things that the division requires that that I talk to you guys about. So has everyone signed in?
Yeah, she has.
Oh,
Actually, she didn't.
Oh, really?
I don't think she's.
I think she believed it. She's out. Yeah. She was like, I'm not sticking around.
That's not a contract.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So now with that, here's what we're going to do. So here's what we're going to start with is I'm going to ask you guys a question, and you guys on Zoom are welcome to respond as well and unmute and participate. but for the most part, I probably end up interacting more with you guys, but please on Zoom, feel free to unmute and participate. So here's the question for you. What is the difference between an appraisal and what we're going to be talking about today, which I really didn't introduce today's class. Today's class is on CMAs, or a comparative market analysis. What is the difference though between an appraisal and a CMA?
Appraisals are more detailed.
Okay, good. So an appraiser is more detailed. Good.
An appraisal is by a licensed person, right? Like not a realtor, but like an actual appraiser.
Okay, good. So an appraisal is done by a licensed appraiser. Good. I like it.
It's like comparing it to like other houses that are in the market, that have been contract that have been sold, and just kind of get an idea of like, you know, what the price is compared to what we are seeing as agents in market for.
Okay, good. So I'm going to probably repeat a lot of times what you guys say just for the people on Zoom. So for the CMA, what you're saying is just kind of us getting a feel for what's going on out there in the market. Okay, good, great.
Essentially, there's still both opinions on what that value of the house is, kind of, they may or may not even match up. But you got real estate agents trying to get an opinion on value for his customer, his client. The appraiser doing it more for the banks.
Okay, good. I'm going to come back to that in a second.
Licensed appraiser has to use at least two approaches to value. The full blown appraisal.
Okay, good.
They don't
Okay, so
abbreviate.
okay, good. So an appraiser is going to take a couple of different approaches to doing it, at least, yeah. Versus we typically just kind of take one. Okay, good.
Okay, the appraisal is ordered by the bank. And the CMA is generally requested by a customer.
Okay, good. So yeah, so let's talk about that. So the appraisal typically is ordered by the bank, and ordered by the bank for who?
The buyer.
Is it for the buyer?
For the lender.
Okay, good. So really they're doing it for the lender. Now, why? Why are they doing that for the lender? Paid for by the buyer, but it's for the lender, really.
To justify the loan amount.
Okay, good. So to justify what, and stop and think about it for a minute. If you were going to be the bank for somebody, you were going to give them a loan on a property, you would probably want to know from a third party independent person to say, hey, how much is the house worth? And the idea being then, if I'm going to go give you money for this house, I want to know if for some reason you don't pay me, I could get the house back and turn around and sell it to get my money back, right? So good. Any other thoughts? Anybody from Zoom? Any thoughts in the Zoom world? The Zoomosphere or whatever.
I have a thought.
Okay, go ahead.
I had always heard that the appraisal is what the bank will loan on the property.
Okay, good. That is correct. Good. All right. So now, follow-up question. Which one is more accurate? The appraisal or the CMA?
That's what the house sells for.
Okay, good. Depends on what the house sells for. Neither?
They're both opinions.
Okay, that's actually probably the best answer, is that neither is more accurate, because they are both just an opinion. So that's good. I like that. What though, when it comes to the general public, what do they think?
They think that appraisal, I would think in the transaction, because it's more contingent upon that, than my guesstimate, the guesstimate of what the home sell for.
Okay, but let's even take the transaction out of the equation. Let's just say that you're going out to meet with a potential seller and they say to you, well, I had an appraisal done. Which one if you came up with a different value than the appraiser did, which one is the client going to tend to
The higher one.
side with?
No.
The appraisal goes in more depth. And you
Prior-
have an appraisal date. And two approaches to value.
Okay,
A CMA doesn't determine fair market value and the appraisal does. So the appraisal always will trump the CMA.
okay, good. So as far as the lender is concerned, I would agree. The appraisal is always going to trump the CMA as far as the lender is concerned. But does that mean it's more accurate than our CMA?
No.
Yeah, I would say not necessarily. So, and in fact, I now this is again just personal opinion, but in my opinion, I feel like Do we have any appraisers? Anybody licensed appraisers, either online or before I say what I'm about to say? You what?
One,
An old one? You used to be one?
30 years.
Okay, good. So I just always like to know because of what sometimes it feels like I might be beating them up a little bit. So, so forgive me if
You're
I
not
beat
the
you up.
first.
Yeah. So, but here's what I always feel like and want to say. Keep in mind that when you're dealing with the public, they're always going to feel like, well, the appraiser said this, therefore it is like law or whatever. Versus we come in and say it and they kind of go, well, yeah, what do you know though? Like you're an agent. And I get where that comes from, but in my opinion, I feel like we a lot of times, and obviously this is not going to be across the board, but a lot of times I feel like we actually do a better job of pricing properties than what an appraiser is going to do. Now, that, like I said, there's going to be exceptions always to all of those things, but the reason I say that is because I feel like the reason that we typically do a better job is, and this will be helpful, Lisa. So when an appraiser is doing an appraisal, so let's just say I've got this house right here, okay? And the appraiser is going to go down, do an appraisal on this house. What are kind of the guidelines, and we don't need to get like way detailed on this, but as general guidelines, like how far away from the property are they typically going to go? Everybody's going to look to you. You shouldn't have admitted
As
these.
far as they have to get that paired sales analysis.
Okay, so
Whether it's next door, 3 doors, 2 blocks, whether the sales do.
okay, so maybe even a better way of saying it is, how far can you go from this property before you're going to have to justify why you went that far?
Like
Is
2
it like,
miles.
or a mile, is it, like, you wanna stay within a mile, is that?
Okay, good. Yeah. So that's typically what I say is think of it as, now, again, there are going to be, this is going to all vary. And I'm sure this is probably part of where you're hesitating is it kind of depends on where the property is as to how far you're going to go. Because if we were out in a rural part of the state, obviously you're going to have to use a much bigger area. But just think of it as a general rule is a 1 mile radius from the property. Okay. What else are they going to be looking at in terms of doing the CMA? So how far back in time can we go?
Well, you're screwing my head up. In your write-up, you would have to justify that and explain that you were in a rural area, there were no sales, you know?
Sure.
You could explain that, right?
Right.
Okay.
And I've never, let me clarify, I've never been an appraiser, so you may know a lot of this stuff better than I do.
Well, I'm just trying to think, are you in a homogeneous area, you in a subdivision?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It kind of, this is all gonna vary, right?
Okay, gotcha,
But so we'll just say typically for Salt Lake County though, like,
gotcha.
yeah, okay. So how far back in time
6 months.
typically? Okay, good.
6.
So typically they're gonna look 6 months, but what's that? Yeah, but keep in mind, though, that the closer to today, the better. Now, remember, we're talking about an appraisal now, and the reason we're spending all this time talking about how an appraiser goes about doing it is the way that we're going to approach it is we got to approach it somewhat similar to the appraiser, because at the end of the day, we're going to get an offer on this property, and we're going to then have to more than likely get an appraisal done on the property. And so we need to have done our CMA somewhat with the same approach so that we know what we're going to be dealing with. Okay, so 6 months back, but typically they're going to want to see it more like 3 months. Okay, so what else?
Square footage.
Okay, good. So we want to find about the same size square footage property. Good. What else? Yes.
Some of like the how many beds, baths.
Okay. Good.
Age,
Okay, good. Beds,
acreage,
baths, acreage. I'm just going to put acres and
Type of dwelling,
age, somebody said, right? Age, condition.
type of dwelling.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say style. Is that good enough? Okay, good. So that gives us a general way of going about this. Okay, so So keep in mind, we're gonna want to do this same type of a thing as we're doing our CMA, but there are a few differences, and I'm gonna point that out to you guys as we go through it. So here's what the plan is for the rest of the day. So I'm gonna pull the screen down here. And what we're gonna do is I've got a property that is currently on the market that we're going to do a CMA on to see what you guys, and you guys are gonna decide. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna though walk you through the way that I do it. Now, let me preface this by saying a couple of things. Actually, let me back up from that. When I first got my real estate license, and I remember the first time I went to do a CMA on a property, I went to, I don't know who it was, one of the agents in the office, my manager, I don't remember, but I just said, okay, help me figure out how to decide what this property is going to be worth. And what I wanted, and so just, I'm going to say this a lot today, but what I wanted was I wanted doing a CMA to be a science. But keep in mind that doing a CMA is more of an art than it is a science. And what I mean by that is I wanted it to be a scenario, and I think a lot of agents want this as well, to where you could just go plug in the information and then the computer spits out this is what the property is worth. But doing a CMA is more of an art than than it is of a science. And I didn't like that because I wanted it to be like you just plug in, it's in this area, it's this style of house, it's got this many beds and baths, it's got this square footage, and have the computer kick out, here's what the house will sell for, and then have it be a scenario where it actually sold for that. But that is not the way that it works. It's more of an art than it is a science. Okay, so just keep in mind. And so the reason I prefaced that whole thing is what we're going to go through is I'm going to show you the way that I go about doing it. But just because that's the way I do it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the way to do it. And so some of you may have differing ways you go about it. And just keep in mind that if we had 10 different people come up here and teach how to do a CMA, you're going to have probably 6 or 7 different ways they would potentially go about it. But hopefully at the end of the day, we end up at about the same spot. So does that make sense? So just keep in mind, it's more of an art than this is a science that we're going to go through and talk about this. Now, one other quick story real quick of why I say to you that I feel like typically that we do a better job of valuing property than what an appraiser does is I have a neighbor up the street who's actually a friend. Like we're kind of frenemies, I guess I would say. Like we're friends, but like we disagree on a lot of different things. And so he's an appraiser. And that's what he full-time is currently doing, is he's an appraiser. And in fact, if you ever call me sometime and are like, hey, I need somebody to go and measure a property, I'm going to probably give you his name and phone number and all that kind of stuff. But I have another neighbor that lives up the street from him. So from my house, you go up the street, you would get to where his house, but if you keep going up the street, there's this other neighbor. Well, this other neighbor at the top called me one day and said his mom had passed away and he wanted my help in going to sell her property. Now, the property that she owned was in Taylorsville, just over kind of by the Four Lakes Golf Course, if you're familiar with that is, just off of Atherton Drive there. And he said, can you meet me out at the house and then, tell me what you think it would sell for? So I drive over there. You got it. Thanks. So I drive over there and meet him at the property. And we look at the house. Now, this home was built right around 2000, and this was at least 10 years ago, maybe even longer. But I meet him out there to go look at this property. And when we get there, the home was built in 2000, but no basement. So his mom was elderly when she built the home. And she was just like, I don't want stairs. So she had the home built without a basement. So you got a newer construction home, no basement. Now, there are not a lot of houses built since 2000 in Salt Lake County, and specifically there, that didn't have basements. So I go out and I look at it and I tell him, okay, this is gonna be a little bit harder to value because there are not a lot of homes that are gonna been on the market that were built since 2000 that also didn't have a basement. So I said, I'm gonna go back to my office, I'll put it together, I'll call you back. So I go back to the office, I work on it, I put it together, and I call up my neighbor and I say, okay, I've got it for you, here's kind of what I've come up with, and I send him what I have come up with in terms of a value. And I told him, and these numbers might not be exactly right, but I told him I thought it would probably sell for around $185,000. And he said, well, hold on. I got an appraisal done by our other neighbor. And he said, and he told me it was worth 217,000. And I said, okay, will you send me a copy of the appraisal? Because I want to see, maybe he found some comparables that I didn't. Like, I want to see what he did differently than me. So he sends me the appraisal. I get the appraisal and I look at it. And the first thing that I noticed, the very first comparable that he used. So now keep in mind, this one is in Taylorsville, just off Atherton Drive here. He used a comparable in Sandy over here. And I was like, okay, well, like, and now I get it. I understand why, because again, there weren't a lot to choose from. But is there going to be a difference in value between that Atherton one in Taylorsville by Four Lakes Golf Course and Sandy?
Usually.
Yeah, and so should he have made an adjustment for it? Yes. Anyway, I go through all this stuff and I ended up finally calling him and I was like, I don't know how you did this, but like the value you came up with, there is no way this house is going to sell for that. So we put it on the market, and of course, what does the seller want to list the property for? The appraiser, 217,000. Great, we put it on there. I explain our pricing strategy. We put it on the market. We go, no showings, no offers. Oh, I forgot one other piece that I left out too. Right outside of her, so this neighborhood is basically a cul-de-sac, and her backyard, the backyard to this house, is a mobile home park. So is that going to change the value of the home a little bit? Yeah. So what ends up happening is I say, well, you know, maybe if you didn't have that right there, it could potentially sell for more. But I just said, I feel like a lot of the buyers are going to come and look at this and see that their backyard neighbor is a mobile home park and not be too excited about it. And so we put it on, and sure enough, we had very few showings, and the showings that we did have, the feedback was, well, my clients didn't like the fact that there was a mobile home park right behind them. So we slowly work on reducing the price. We get the price down to about 190,000, and we finally get an offer and it sells. So it sells for basically where I thought that probably would. Now, I am by no means like trying to brag, like, look at how good I was. That is not the moral of this story. The moral of the story was, I just feel like because you and I are out looking at houses on a day-to-day basis, that even though, yes, an appraiser is like, again, I know this maybe sounds like and feels like I'm beating up on appraisers, but I'm not. I just feel like you and I are out looking at what's currently happening in the market versus with an appraiser. I have just found they tend to be a little bit behind the curve, meaning we will notice the market's changing before an appraiser typically is going to, because we're interacting with the current buyers and sellers versus they're looking at, well, what happened? How did what houses have sold? Are you following what I'm saying? Is it making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, we're going to now go through and I'm going to walk you through how I would do it. And again, I don't want to say that I'm like the authority, this is how you do it automatically. I'm going to show you the art of how I go about it. There may be other ways. I have just always struggled with these programs that even like Cloud CMA that's on the MLS and all that, agents want it to be a science where we just plug it in and it spits out an answer, and it just doesn't work that way. And I could share stories with you where I've been the opposite too, where I've thought for sure it would sell at this price and it sold for much less. Like, so just know, like, I'm not trying to say like I am the authority, like I'll mess up on it just as easy as anybody else. But okay, so with that, we're going to jump in now and get going on showing you how I would go about doing an appraisal, or it's not an appraisal, CMA. I'm not an appraiser. Okay, So let me get my screen share going here. All right, so typically how I'm gonna approach this is,
Russ,
yeah,
you use a basic program as your to input information? What would you use?
say that again,
What program or do you use?
to do a CMA. What I'm gonna use is the MLS.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's in there also Center 21 version.
Yes, so actually, yeah, good point, thank you. So, yeah, I probably would use on Moxie Present. So on 21 Online, we've got the Moxie Present software that is something that the brokerage provides for you. It is actually pretty good, and so I probably would use that, although I usually really am gonna start with just what we're talking about right here, so. Okay, so here's how I do it now. So again, like I said, just keep in mind, I'm gonna walk you through the process that I typically follow when I'm doing this. And so the way that I like to do it is I typically am gonna start with always of saying, okay, I want to look up and see what's the history of the property. And like I said, when it comes to this, like some agents may not do that. I just like to. Did you quite, oh, you get,
No, I'm just.
okay. I was like, I didn't know if you were.
Trying to get ready.
She's making sure she stays. All right, here we go. So here's what I like to do is I usually like to start out by just saying, okay, I want to look at what's the history of this property, which do you guys want lights off? Is that a little better? Yep, yes, no,
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes.
Thank you.
someone? Okay, so what I typically like to do is come in here and I'll just put in like the house number, or if I knew an old MLS number, I could do that as well. But you can see by just putting in the house number, I've got 63 matches. If I wanted to narrow that down more, I'd probably go here to the county and say, okay, let's look at Salt Lake County. And that's narrowed it down to 33, but so I'm just gonna go view results. Then from here, I typically just am gonna scroll down to get to where I see the property. So in this case, here is this one, okay? So from here, and I'm gonna hold off on clicking on the history of this because what I don't want to do is bring up because this property is currently listed, but we're gonna assume it's not. Okay, so I'm gonna do this as if it's not listed, even though it is, because I want to see what you guys come up with in a price, and then we'll see what it's actually listed at and what has gone on with the property. Okay, so you guys on Zoom, don't cheat and go look. But okay, so this is the property. Now, this actually, I had this was my first house. I had this home built in '93, I guess, is when my wife and I had it built. So we're just gonna go through and look at this property to see what you guys think it would sell. But prior to it being on the market currently, this is the last time it sold. So I actually bought the home for like 74,000 or something like that. And then I sold it for 146 or something. Then that was in 2000. Then in 2008, they tried to resell it for way high and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it finally ended up selling in 2012 for 125,000. Okay. So we're going to assume that, in fact, actually, let's look at the photos real quick here. We're going to assume, and we're assuming this because I've already looked at the pictures this morning, so I already know, but the kitchen looks the same. The paint is not orange or whatever color that is anymore, but the cabinets are still the same. The counter's the same. The floor looks like it's the same. This is now carpet instead of linoleum. It looks like they've just recently put in carpet. So let's just assume, I'm going to just go through the pictures here. Assume that this has had new carpet and paint, but that's it. Okay, no other updates. So like that's got new carpet, the paint looks much better. But like that's new carpet here. But the tile's still there, all of this. is there. This tree is now fully grown, like it's oversized, so it's. So I guess what I'm saying is like, when, if I were to pull up the current one and show you the pictures, it doesn't look as good as this from the outside, just because of the landscaping and stuff, but, okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, so. What we're gonna do though is let's just kind of look at it, so it's 1,800 square feet, 3 bedrooms up, 2 down. A full bath up, a 3/4 bath down, which that's actually not true, it's a full bath down here, and then a half bath here, okay? So 5 total bedrooms, 2 full baths and a half bath, what we're doing, okay? Everybody good?
Yeah.
All right, so with that, once we know that. Then we're now gonna come in here and do the CMA, and I'm gonna start it out doing it the way that we talked about. And along the way, I'll throw in some of the things that I potentially would change up on it, but. All right, and along the way, though, I'm gonna have you guys commit to, like, what would be your recommended list price? I'm gonna ask you throughout as we go through, okay? So here's how I always wanna start out with. For me, is I start out with, let's look at the sold properties. That are within the, we'll start with the 1 mile radius. So the way I like to do it is click on the view map, come into here, and then we're gonna do this radius tool. And then just kind of as an FYI, and what I don't want, if you have questions, please ask, but what I don't want to do is turn this into a how to use the MLS class, but I will point out a few things here. So I'm gonna just start with, and we'll just say within, let's say, a mile. Of the property, which on this, you can type in either the address of the property, or if you have an MLS number, and I printed it off, so. I'm gonna just throw in an MLS number, just so you know, if you have an MLS number, you can do that. All right, so you can see here, pulling that up in a 1 mile radius, there are a lot of properties so far, okay?
Can you use a tax ID number in that field? If you don't have an MLS. but
I don't know if you can,
it's a location?
I've never tried the tax ID, so I don't know.
Well, because if you haven't listed it yet, you don't have your MLS number yet, right?
Right.
So,
But you could use an old MLS if it had been on the MLS before.
okay.
So, or just type in the address. Yeah. All right, which I don't know what's going on right here with this, but. Okay, so we've got 247 that have sold, but that's the whole state. Or no, sorry, that was within that 1 mile radius, but in the last year. So we also want to narrow that down as well, right? So I'm going to scroll down here, and this is going back to January of last year. So I could change that date, or we could just say here, and typically for me, a lot of times I'll just go to this number of days back. Now, remember I said we typically want it to be within the last 6 months, but really more like 3 months or so. So I typically, the number I'm going to put in here, and this is where it becomes more of an art than a science. But for me, is the number I'm going to put in here is kind of more for me of like what's currently going on in the market. Meaning, has the market changed much in the last 90 days? Would you guys say? Yes.
Quite a
no?
bit, yeah.
Yes,
And in what way would you say? What do you mean by that?
prices are decreasing.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I would, in that case, then I would say I'm gonna put in 90 days. If I felt like, it hasn't really changed that much in the last 3 or 4 months, I might put in 120 days. But I would say then let's limit it to, let's look at the last 90 days, okay? So when I plug in 90 days, that brings us down to 35 matches. Well, the other things that we want to have in here is the style. So this style of home is going to be a it's a tri-level. Which, so I heard somebody say 2-story. Occasionally, if I'm not getting comparables, I may also throw in 2-story there just because. And I haven't seen this much as much lately, but I've seen a lot of times where agents would call this tri-level or a multi-level, sorry, they would call it a 2-story in the past just because they thought it might sound better. So if I was having a hard time finding comparables, again, this is one of those art versus science things, I would go and put in 2-story, but then go and actually see, did an agent list a 2-story that's really a multi to find.
That MLS had 2-story on it, so wouldn't you?
Oh, did it?
Yeah, wouldn't you go by what the tax records stated that it was?
So you could go by what the tax records say that it is, but. I know this house is a trap. If I'm gonna actually go by what it really is, regardless of what the tax records say, what a previous MLS says. I think you should go by what it is. So yeah, you're correct. So, all right. So I'm gonna put that in. Let's see, that narrows us down to 8 properties that have sold in the last 90 days. But the other thing that I might want to put in here is come down here to. We could put in year built, but I'm guessing that it's probably okay. And I might want to put in square footage here. So I'm probably gonna say, let's do, so the square footage on it was 1808. So what should we put as our range here?
Maybe like
500 square feet. Above and below.
500?
Yeah, a range between 500, let's like.
Oh,
18,
okay.
100 to, I can't do that fast, but 1200, yeah.
Okay, so good. Yeah, so on this again, there's not really a set answer on this, but I would just say for me, here's how I like to think of it. The smaller the house, the smaller the range I'm gonna put in. The bigger the house, probably the bigger the range. And you might even want to look at it and say, maybe you do a 5% or a 10%, something like that. I don't know. But for me, again, this is, I mean, I know I'm going to keep saying this over and over, but this is the whole art versus science thing for me is I usually am going to try to look at it and I want to think like a buyer. Like that's what I would say the difference between how I approach it versus how like an appraiser typically is. For me, I want to think like a buyer. And what I mean by that is somebody that is looking to buy a home that has at least 2,000 square feet going to look at one that's at 1,800 square feet? Maybe, but
They want more.
typically if they've said to you, I want to buy a home with at least 2,000 square feet and you go show them one with 1,800, how are they going to feel?
You're not listening to me.
Yeah, like, did you not hear? We said we want at least 2,000. So for me, I kind of try to think that way of like, and again, I'm not right. Like, just know, like, I'm just teaching you guys how I go about it. So for me, I'm going to put in on the upper end. And again, this is just me, but I'm putting 1999 because in my thinking is somebody who's wanting a home with 2,000 square feet is probably not going to want to be looking necessarily at this one. Okay. So, and on the lower end, it's an 1,800. We might put 1,500. I don't know. To me, in my head, just letting you know what I'm thinking as I'm doing it is I might even have said, let's do 1,600, but for sure, I'm not going to go below 15. So let's see what that does for us. So that's taking us down to 3. Well, that actually might not be enough. Like, I don't know. So I'm kind of actually surprised that we're only getting 3 there, but.
It's because it's tri-level.
You want me to put in 2 stories? Is that what you're saying?
I would take that out. I would take that out for sure.
Well,
or maybe put both on.
And select both of them.
I'm okay with selecting both. I don't want to include ramblers and stuff. So we'll go back here and we'll throw in 2-story and see what it does.
Mr. Russ, what about the radius? Like, cause that we're on that 1 mile right now.
Yeah.
At
So-
which point do we say, okay, let's up it to 2?
Yeah, great question. So in fact, that's where I want that. One of the things I want to point out on that is when Nancy's saying, why should we up it from a mile to maybe 2 miles? Again, this is where I want to approach it as let's think like a buyer. Because is a buyer who's going to buy in that area going to say, well, it has to be in this one area, like it's got to be in this 1 mile radius? Typically not. Like there are some, no question, there are some that there are, like I've had some buyers that are like, it has to be in this neighborhood. I won't look at anything that's not in that neighborhood. So I get that. But as a general rule, it's kind of like, okay, we want to be so many miles or whatever from work or minutes or whatever. But so we could do that as well. We could do that. The other thing that and again, doesn't mean it's right, but probably the way I would do it in this case, I feel like I would probably say, let's go to 120 days back instead of the just 90. Because as I think through it, I'm like, yeah, it may or may not. So I don't know. We'll see. So we're back to 11 here to where, yeah, maybe we want to narrow it down more than that. I don't know. I'm gonna put it back to 90. We'll just go with the 5 and see. So let's see what we come up with here, okay? So I'm gonna click on view results. Now, from here, this has given us 5 properties that have come up. And for me, I'm just gonna go in and we're gonna do the agent full report. Now, we're not gonna spend as much detailed time as I really would spend probably looking at these properties today. But I'm gonna walk you through like kind of just what my thinking is, how I would go about it. I don't know what is going on with this little police thing here, but whatever. Okay, so what I'm gonna do next is, because we did select 2-story as well as multi-level, I wanna look at all 5 of these to see, are they really multi-level homes versus 2-story, which I can tell that is from looking at it. That's a multi. That's a multi. That is a multi-level, but it's a little different layout than
Looks
what
like
ours.
2 of them have unfinished basements though.
And so, you know, this one actually is kind of funny to me because they've listed this as a 2-story and that is not a 2-story. But that proves the point of why you sometimes agents will do stuff because that sounds better than split. So, all right, so I'm gonna get rid of this one. Because that one is not. What was the other one that's marked as 2-story? Oh, this one. So yeah, see, somebody did list this one as a 2-story. So I'm glad you said to bring it in because this potentially could be a good comparables for us. So, okay, so we've got 4 here. The next thing that I would be looking at is I want to keep an eye on the number of beds and baths. And specifically on this one here, notice it's got 3 bedrooms and a 2-bath upstairs. Versus ours only had 1 bathroom. So this one has like a separate master bathroom that ours doesn't have. So do we want to keep that as a compare? Do you guys feel like that it would still be a comparable property or no? And there's not a right answer necessarily, but
I think you want this one because it actually has a finished basement. There's 2 in there that don't have
they
finished
don't.
basements.
Okay.
Which will skew the square footage.
Okay, so maybe we do, maybe we don't, and like I say, this is where, by the way, this is kind of where, if a person had 3 or 4 different agents come out and give them a CMA, they're gonna come up with slightly different prices because one might use this and one other agent might not. Now, here's what I will tell you, and again, this is where just kind of knowing the market and what's going on is gonna help you develop this art versus a science kind of a thing. So remember I said I've been teaching this class long before even the division was requiring you to do something like this. And I have used this ever since I sold this house. Well, probably 5 years after I sold it. Since about 2005, whenever I teach a CMA class, I use this property. So I've been doing CMAs on this particular property for a long, long time. And every time I sit and kick myself that I didn't keep it as a rental, that I sold it. Anyway, you'll see today why. But here's what's interesting is over the years, what I've noticed early on when I would do these CMAs, I would have like back in 2005, I would have 100% said we are not going to use this as a comparable because there was a disparate, the price difference between one that had a master bath versus one that didn't was big. Versus what I've noticed over the last few years, it seems like, and I don't know if it's because of the age of the properties now or what, but it seems like there doesn't seem to be a big difference. But let's see, maybe there still is. So that's ultimately what I would be looking at here. So this one here sold for $516 in November, went under contract went under contract in October. But as you look at that, you go, okay, should we keep it or not? I don't know. Let's look at these others and then we'll decide. So this one here sold for $485, has the 3 bedrooms and 1 bath up, has the half bath, has the full bath. So there's a difference of 1 bedroom, but that's probably not that big of a deal. And that was in November. So on this one, I would be saying, well, let's kind of look at the condition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, much nicer condition than what ours is, right? Yeah, I would say this one's a way better condition than what the one we were looking at. So I would say, yeah, let's keep it. But, and to some extent, that actually has me almost feel like not keeping this one at 516 versus a 485, but let's see what the next one says to decide. So this one here's at 480. 3 bedrooms. Now, again, it's got the 2 baths up though. So if we're not going to keep this top one because of the 2 bath, we almost can't keep this one. So now all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, maybe we do keep it. And let's look at the condition on this. Much nicer, huh? Okay. What's that?
It looks like it was done by the same builder.
I know it does, doesn't it? Looks like the same person came in and did it. Okay.
That doesn't have a finished basement though.
Okay, yeah, and so again, on that. It's a question of do we want to keep that because it doesn't have the finished basement or not? And
Adjusted.
yeah,
Needs to be adjusted.
yeah, so for me personally, I don't worry as much about the finished basement unless. If all of them were not finished, like to some extent, I guess what I'm saying, and part of what I'm looking for, again, back to this art versus science stuff, is part of what I'm looking at when I go look at those photos is I'm going and looking to see if every single one of these sold ones is an updated property, like new kitchen, and ours is not, that's going to be a big impact on what I'm going to say price wise. Versus I actually had one time when I was doing a CMA on this same area where there were properties that were for sale that were updated and not selling. Every single one of the houses that had sold had not been updated. So like to some extent back then I would have said to my seller, oh, you updated your property? That's too bad. It's actually made it harder to sell. Like, believe it or not, during that time frame, when I was looking at it, none of the ones that were updated had sold. All the homes that had not been updated were selling. And I don't know why, but that's just kind of what I noticed. So I would say that same thing on if every single home that was selling didn't have a finished basement, I might start to think, well, the fact that this one is finished might be a detriment. Does that make sense? I mean, it might not, but just that's how my mind's working through this. Okay. All right, let's look at the last one here. So this last one's a little bit different of a layout, but 400,000. It's only a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, unfinished basement, the half bath. Let's look at the condition.
That's a split, isn't it? Don't you think about it? Doesn't look like a tri-level.
No, I think it still is. It's just a little bit different of a layout because you've got here's the few stairs to go up and then a few down. So, okay. All right. So now let's say we're going to use these 4. So now back to the question that I think Greg asked of like, what program am I going to use to show it? Probably I would say I would use the Moxie Present. But truthfully, for most of my career in real estate, I would just take these 4 properties and I would come over here and do the client full report, and then I print it and take these out. Now, the reason I do the client full report is notice it says up here presented by and has my name. Under the agent full report, it doesn't have my name anywhere on there and it has the listing agents. And so the reason I always switch and use this one is I had one time, this only ever happened once, but it was enough that it's like, I make sure I use the client full. So I went out to present, this was to a friend, luckily. I had gone out to do a CMA for them. I sat down and I had used the client full report. And I'm going through the properties and talking to my friend, potential client, and showing him this house sold for this much and it had this many bedrooms and baths and square footage and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going through it and talking to him about it. And after we get done, he goes, you know, Russ, I think we're going to call so-and-so to list our house. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And he said, well, yeah, all of these comparables that you just showed me, that agent sold all 3 of them. And I was like, what? And then I looked back and I was like, wow, coincidentally, that's the 3 comps that I had pulled, the same agent has sold all 3 of them. And I was like, I'll never do that again. So now when I go and present them, they all show my name instead of the agent.
If
Anyway,
you
okay.
scroll down, it's not, their information's not on there.
No, it gives them only public information.
Oh, okay, good.
Doesn't give them agent remarks or anything. So for me, I usually am just gonna print this out. Then I would sit down with the client and go through and say, okay, here's how this one's like yours, here's how it's worse, just here's why it's similar, whatever. So, okay, so at this point. Now, here's where, and you guys in Zoom, you get to participate too, either unmute or type it in the chat box. Go
So
ahead.
you're just presenting the MLS findings. You're not making adjustments when you present this?
For me, I
Yes.
don't.
Oh, well,
That's easy.
that's your CMA?
That's gonna be my CMA. Well, we're not done yet, but yes.
Oh,
I don't show up, like I could, so let me show you what you're asking. I could come
That's
go.
your mark.
Now, again, keep in mind that. It's an art, not a science. I'm showing you how I do it. Doesn't mean it's the right way. I'm just showing you how I do it. So could I use this? Yes, I could
How do you
use this.
put the value at the end of the day for them?
Well, I'll show you. I'm actually not going to. I'm gonna let them come up with it. I'm gonna let them come up with the value. But typically here's why I don't though. Let me show you why I don't like these programs. So if I did present it this way, which then looks like, and again, I want to be really clear, you can do this. I'm just showing you how I do it. Is the reason I don't like this is this is going to put this information here. I could type in up here this populate subject data and put in have it pull from the MLS all the information here. And then it will make adjustments to come up with a price. And you can do that. The reason I don't like it and the reason I typically don't train it to do that way is because what I've found is, let's say that the seller on this was saying they wanted to list it for like $490 or something. What I found is an agent is going to go through and manipulate these numbers to make it come out pretty close to right here to what the seller wants it to say. And I don't like coming up with an exact number on the house personally. I like presenting to them and saying, what do you think now based on this information the house would sell for? So I could do it that way. So you can, and if you like it and want to do it that way, you can do it. It's just, here's where I struggle. The MLS says that a bedroom's worth $2,000. Is that what a bedroom is worth? Well, I don't know. Maybe it is. And is a bedroom worth $2,000 in Grantsville is a 2-bedroom worth $2,000 in Park City? Are they worth the same amount in Park City as they are? Like, I don't know all that. So that's where for me, I just personally like to show up with this. And then I would sit down and say, okay, let's go through this. And I would show the seller, hey, this home has been updated. It's got new cabinets. It's got the solid countertops. It's got new stove. Like, you can see this one's totally updated versus yours is not. So that one sold for $516 in November. I would go through and it's got more square footage than you had. It has an extra bath upstairs that you don't have. So yours is going to be less than that. Then I would go to this one and do, this one's pretty similar to yours. Very similar, with the exception that, and when we looked at it, they've done a ton of upgrades. You haven't done upgrades, so you're probably going to be less than that. Then we would come down to this one and do the same kind of a thing of, this one looks like it was fixed up by that same person. But so, okay, so here's what I want to know from you guys. Then this one sold for $400. So here's the thing, for me, I don't want to bring 4 properties that have that big of a range. Like, we've got over $100,000 range. I don't want to show up really with that. So the question is, do I get rid of this one or do I get rid of the 515?
I get rid of that one because it only has 2 bedrooms
Okay,
and. It
Look at the
doesn't,
number of adjustments.
yeah, it just doesn't look, plus it would
Yeah.
want FHA too.
Okay, so here's the question for you guys, and maybe this isn't the best example, these comparables, but that's okay. Give me now, and you guys on Zoom, throw it in the chat box and or unmute, I don't care. How much what would you recommend that the list price be on this home after looking at these? Everybody give me a number. Nobody wants to go first. Well, and then watch what happens. Whoever goes first, everybody else's number will be close to that. Watch. I'm just kidding. What was the first?
449, 449, 900.
449, 900. Okay,
That's what I'm going with.
okay. What else?
425.
425. Okay.
I'll say we're 32,999.
Okay, 432, 999. Okay, what else?
I'm gonna say 410 to be aggressive on pricing.
Okay, 410. Okay,
Depends on how fast the home needs to be sold.
okay, that's a good question. Okay. But let's say that it's just kind of this, like, they want it sold, but it's like not, it doesn't need to be sold tomorrow, but you know, in the next month, maybe 2 at the most.
That one's only 7 days, so.
Yeah, good point. All right, everybody that didn't give me a number, give me a number.
425.
425,
415.
415.
Well, how much?
Okay, good question. We can look at that. So that one was 7 days. This one was 16,
So maybe a month.
25,
We're closer to 480.
167. 167.
Yeah, that's only 15,000.
Can we see the home again? The actual home that we're doing the CMA on?
Sure. Okay, new tab here.
Hey, yeah, I saw that.
I don't know, I don't remember the MLS number.
Yeah.
What I put in. Oh, I put in the actual one. I don't want you to see the subject yet, though.
I'm like,
Although maybe it doesn't matter.
45.
Oh, did you already see it? Somebody look it up?
No,
no,
no, it was right there. Yeah. We can see your
no,
screen
I
still.
didn't. I was gonna say, I was just gonna say.
That's all right. I'll pull it up. This is what it actually,
I was
this
gonna
is
say
where,
450.
this is what it looks like right now. So this is where I was telling you, it doesn't, like, the inside looks still pretty much the same.
Okay.
This market.
You can see the carpet and stuff looks better than that original photo I showed you.
Okay.
Okay? So based on that, okay, what's your price?
450. I was thinking 450.
Okay,
447, I don't know.
447, all right. Cool, okay, so now, here's the next question though. What do we not know?
How much did I sell for?
Well, okay. Yes, we don't know how much it's gonna sell for, that's
But the
good.
seller.
But,
Price it.
okay, what the sellers want to price it, I asked a very poor question, I apologize. So ultimately, I guess what I'm getting at is what we've done so far is the way that an appraiser goes about doing an appraisal. But what do we not know that an appraiser typically doesn't show on an appraisal? Maybe they've looked at, but they don't. So here's what I'm getting at, is we've done this and looked at, here's the solds. Let's now go and look and see what are homes that are currently under contract that meet the same criteria. What's going on with them? Because for me, that's the next thing that I want to see is, okay, that's great. We can see what happened back in November, October, November. So now keep in mind what number you gave me and let's see if it changes based on looking at these under contracts.
Will you
Okay.
take, to your clients are also like some of the ones under contract?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm gonna take out to my client, typically I wanna see 3 or 4 solds. I wanna take 3 or 4 under contracts and then 3 or 4 actives if there are that many, okay? All right, so now let's look at and do the same thing here for these under contracts. So we've got now here 5 properties that are under contract. So let's do the same thing with this, although, like I say, I'm not, if we were actually doing this, I would really dive into this a little more than we are now, but not significantly, but I would be wanting to say, let's look at this one. This one's under contract at 490. has the 2 bedrooms up, so it's fully finished basement. Let's look at the condition real quick, just to get an idea. Okay. That could be an FHA issue here.
Yeah.
Oh, much nicer bathroom. So like this one, I might not want to necessarily keep, but let's see what happens, what else we come up with. So this one here is at 488, it's under contract. It's got 2 baths up. Basement's finished, pretty similar.
That's pretty close.
Yeah. See what it looks like inside,
Okay, so nice for inside.
more updated.
That big shape.
Yeah, okay. This one here. 469 on Impressions Drive. And that one's got the master bathroom as well.
That's probably closer.
Okay. And then this one here at 420, which honestly, I wouldn't bring this one just because of the age of the property. I don't think I would include that one. This one's at 98, and again at 400, not finished. See what it looks like. Kitchen's similar,
Yeah, that's probably.
okay? All right, so now what do you think?
And that one
Is your price changed? What?
and that one is under contract for 400, right?
That one's under contract for 400. All right, so yeah,
It may come early, you would take some sold, some under contracts, and what's the other?
and then the actives.
Active.
Yeah, so we'll look at actives here in a minute. Now, so based on looking at what these under contracts are, which here's the thing that's crazy to me, like so far, we're seeing the same thing with the under contracts that we did with the actives. Like, look at how big of a spread we have in the price range. I mean, that's 490.
Well, do you ever take into consideration that that's the list price, not the under contract price?
Yes,
How many times
Yeah.
have we got accept offers under, especially
It's
nowadays?
still not a balanced sale. That's what
Yeah.
determines the market.
yeah, so what do you mean by that?
What determines the market? A sale determines
Right.
the market. So if it's a listing, it isn't quite in the market yet.
Right, so I get where you're coming from, saying that until it's sold, it's not really a valid. But here's what I'm looking at, the reason I'm looking at the under contracts is what I'm wanting to see is what price generated an offer. Because really, that's where I'm wanting to get to, is what's it gonna take for us to get an offer, which, so again, for me, I would get rid of this one for sure.
Why?
Just because it's older, different style.
Oh,
I mean, a little different style, it still is the same concept, just because of how much older it is of a house, but.
Can you ever like call the agent and ask them like how much they accepted the offer for, like if you're having a really hard time with.
Yes, yes, you could call and ask them what they sold it for, but they probably are not gonna tell you.
Yeah.
So yes, you can ask,
what it's under like her.
yes, yes,
Can you hit the history and just see when they dropped the price down to 400, how fast it went under
Sure.
contract?
yeah, which that is a really good idea of looking at, to saying, okay,
So.
on the 10th of January, they went from 430 to
And then
400
maybe weeks later they went.
and got it under contract after that. Which that's a pretty steep jump, huh?
That's.
Yeah.
Wait, what do you click?
It's the, sorry, history right here,
Right.
and it'll show you what's happened with the history on that.
Change that.
So yeah, they changed 5 days later that it was sold by.
So it was priced too high from the get go.
And they changed the agent's commission, buyer's commission too.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get out fast.
Yep. Okay, so now, here's what I want to know from you guys again. What's your price now? And did it, first off, has your price changed what you would recommend? And if so, what did you change it to?
Mine is the same.
Stays the same?
Mine's gonna, that's still good.
A little bit. 450.
450 now? Okay. What about the rest of you?
I understand, but unfortunately.
425 still, okay?
I think I'll bring it to that too, like for.
420 something, okay.
I'm closer to, I guess I would say I'm closer to, I'll do $1 more, so I'll be, you know.
You're upping your list price by
Yeah.
$1.
I
Okay.
see it more too.
All right, cool. So this one here, let's see the same thing on this. How long from when they adjusted the price? On the 9th, they changed it, went under contract on the 12th.
Oh, they just lowered it a little bit.
Yeah, they didn't change it much, but. Okay. All right, so now that we've seen that, now let's back up here and say, okay, now we want to see. What are the active properties that are in that same area? So now here's the thing though. So let me kind of tell you how I think about this. The way I like to go about thinking of this is, well, actually, I'm gonna wait. I'll come back to that. I'll tell you. All right. So now keep in mind, of these 4, our property is gonna be one of them. Because this property is currently listed. So, but let's go now and see what we come up with and see if you change your mind at all on the price. Because, and here's why, actually, let me back up real quick. Is the reason why, in a lot of ways for me, the actives are going to be more important. And when I say more, it's only slightly more, but they're more important to me. Why? Why would the actives be important in this?
That's your competition.
That's right. And that's part of what you got to remember to get your seller to understand is the actives are your competition. And sometimes the sellers want to look at the actives and look at it and go, well, my house is nicer than that. And look at what their list price is. Well, it also hasn't sold whatever these current list prices are. So just keep in mind that this is our competition. Okay, so now let's see what we come up with here. Okay, so this first one here is listed at 464.9. It's been 84 days on the market. Let's see what the condition looks like.
Those stairs on.
The what?
Those stairs too. Like,
I know,
pictures.
4 pictures.
Like,
Yeah, I
okay,
know.
thanks. Not validated.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna skip, I think the next one is our property, so I'm gonna skip that. Here's a 455, been 40 days on the market. That's interesting.
Different style, I know. So usually, it's like.
I'm guessing that's gotta be wallpaper. Huh?
Oh, my gosh, it's awful.
Nice. It might be, actually looks like brick.
There's no way.
Like bricks here? No, it's not brick.
It looks like it, but it's gotta be wallpaper.
Yeah.
Or that plastic stuff.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's at 455. Let's just see, so they dropped it on December 22nd to 455. Okay. 2-bedroom, 1 bath. I didn't pay attention to what this was. 3-bedroom. Oh yeah, no, we didn't. Oh, no, not that one. That is our subject. No, unfinished, okay. And did we do this one? No.
No.
Okay, so this one's at 435, 4 days on the market.
That's where it's at right there. It's closer to the.
I was gonna say outside looks closer.
Yeah, this is
Okay,
closer to the house.
it is.
I'm thinking this is the one that's gonna be like most like. Well,
Yeah.
It could be higher.
I was gonna say this one's even a little more dated, but 4 days on the market at 435.
It's a little more worn too.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think now?
Staying strong.
Well, that's your competition, that's your direct competition, that last one.
Yep. Yeah, in fact, I would agree. I feel like of everything we've looked at, this one probably is the most comparable.
Yeah, except that it does have a master bath, I think, but.
Did it?
Even though it's in 1986, even though it's still old.
Yeah.
It's only
It's, I
7
mean,
years older.
Good point.
people can't afford it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It is a little bit. The other issue we have here, which again, this is back to art versus science stuff again, is where this property is located is just across the street to the south is West Jordan. It's considered Kearns, I guess. And then, but just a little bit further west is West Valley. So you've kind of got West Valley, West Jordan, Kearns, all kind of in this same general area. And this would be in the West Jordan area, which again, I don't know that that makes that much of a difference, but yeah, a few things that like this one's got an extra bath upstairs that the subject doesn't, but also I would say is a little more dated maybe, and yeah, a little older of a home. So what do you think price wise?
I'm staying.
450?
Just say a little bit more in this, if we'll warrant.
Okay, now, but keep in mind on these actives, again, this is where I'm saying, don't think like a seller, meaning, well, this one's more worn and it's at 435, therefore we could sell for more, because this one hasn't sold.
No, yeah.
I mean, granted, it's only 4 days, but it hasn't sold yet. So you can't put a whole lot of like, oh, well, ours has to be worth more, because maybe this one really should, based on what we saw on the solds and the under contracts, where should this one be priced?
Did it have a history?
More like 400, I would
Lower,
say,
lower.
don't you think?
Yeah, sure. And they'll
No,
get it
because
up for lower.
No, because it's West Jordan. It's got a better zip code and also it's got the master bath, so it's just a matter of $50,000-$60,000 about.
Okay, 420. I don't know.
So from the perspective of people that I work with, if I show them this house, they'll be kind of bougie and like, no, we're not doing that. And they'll actually say, hey, if we do, it'll be at closer to the 400. Because they're not trying to, oh, I'm living this great. They're trying to like find a house for their family.
Right?
They don't care about the location as much as you think. It's like I asked somebody that says, oh, I live in Sandy, and then right under at the foothills, whatever, or in that area. And we were looking at a house in West Jordan, like the next day.
Yeah, how does he?
So it's not so much that, it's just the house really is.
Yeah. So, again, though, it could for sure potentially make a difference, although in some ways, based on, yes, the zip code might be better, so to speak, but I would say driving through the neighborhood, the other one potentially, I don't know, they might be about the same, so who knows? So, okay, so what do you think price?
Stand at 425.
Staying at 425.
420.
Okay, anybody else changing prices?
I agree.
Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. This is the way that typically you're gonna go about doing it, is meaning I'm gonna take some solds, I'm gonna take those under contracts, I'm gonna take these actives, and then I'm gonna sit down and go through with the seller and show them, here's where the ones that have sold. And it is interesting to me, like what this tells me is I do definitely feel like after looking at this is our market still is going through some adjusting, meaning because that's a huge range that these properties have sold in and or are listed in even. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is my bigger thing that I would be doing, going and presenting this to a seller, is I'm going to be presenting it of, number one, there's a huge range here. And so I would also be telling them, like, what we're going to have to do is really spend time talking about the pricing strategy with the seller of, we can start it at whatever price you want to, but we need to follow our pricing strategy, which is every 2 to 3 weeks, we need to be looking at how many showings have we gotten and how many offers have we gotten. And then based on that, we need to be adjusting, or sometimes people say improving the price. But that's how I would be going about doing this. Now, with that being said, though, I'm going to give you a little bit different of an approach of how to do this. How are we doing time-wise? We're good. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit different of an approach, because so far the way we have done this is we did it looking at it the way, like, similar to how an appraiser would go about doing it. But as we've discussed, buyers don't necessarily buy the same way that an appraiser goes out. Or think of it this way. The way a seller values their property is not the way that a buyer does. How is the buyer going to determine what a good price is? So here, let me pull this back up and go back to, this is our subject property here. So it's currently listed at 459.9. And was it 469? Let's look and see They reduced the price on January 6th from 462 to 459.9.
They're
But-
way overpriced.
Yeah, you can see
They're still,
what's going on here, right? So. With that,
At least the laundry's on the main level and not in the basement.
yes. So on this though. How does a buyer gonna determine what this home is worth?
By comparing it to the other ones that are active, right?
Yeah, meaning to some extent, the way they're getting an idea, at least in the beginning. At least in the beginning is they're online doing searches, right? And looking at properties. Then they come to you as an agent, you go out and you start to show them properties and let's say. That they said this is this type of home they're looking for. You're gonna now see, here's these 4 houses for sale. Kind of think of it this way, here's part of what I want you guys thinking of is. If we were gonna do a bet. Which of these houses is gonna sell first?
That's a hard.
Yeah, I mean,
The West Jordan probably because of the little bit more square footage.
you think this one?
Yeah,
I think the top one,
You think this one?
yeah,
And why?
actually. Yeah, I think so.
We got it squared away.
I think it's
I think I'm right.
priced right.
You think this
It's
one's
gonna
priced right?
Oh.
That's the price, really just the price.
Well, so it was under contract and failed, so we at least know that 464.9 generated an offer.
They have
And then
actually,
it just fell apart
yeah,
there.
they're gonna probably gonna get other offers there.
Can you click, Mr. Jones, can you click on the 455 property, so like,
Yep.
and the history of that one? If it had any. No action.
So just kind of keep in mind though, that typically the buyer's gonna get a feel for it by going out and looking at, either looking online. Or they're getting in a car and going and driving around looking at properties, right? Well. Then from there, an agent may say, once they're interested, is when we start looking, well, let's see what others have sold for and blah, blah, blah. But here's kind of the way I like to do it is, and this is a little different approach. But I like to do it this way. I'm gonna start with what we just did. But then from there, the next thing that I want to go do is I want to go out and say, okay, let's think now, instead of thinking like a seller, which is what we've been doing. Let's go think like a buyer. Because a buyer is not going to go, okay, I want to be in a 1 mile radius of this area. So we're going to approach this more like how a buyer would. So I'm going to clear this criteria out. And we're going to say, okay. First thing that I want to look at is I want to look at the solds. And I'm going to go to the map here. We're going to jump to the property, our subject property here. But I'm gonna back out here and say, okay. And this is where I'm gonna let you guys tell me a little bit. If we've got a buyer who wants to buy in this area, right here where this property is. How big of the rest of this area would you say we should use? Now, I don't think we should do, like Aubrey said, that people started in Sandy and ended up there. I don't think we want that big of an area. But if somebody's gonna buy out in this area. Kind of, you guys give me kind of an east, west, north, south. What should we look at? What would be kind of a,
probably 6,200, so.
well, so it already is, it's just barely off 6,200 south. So how far north from there and south?
Just think of that as like north of that is not so great.
Okay,
That's how I look at it.
okay. You guys give me an idea. I'll tell you how I typically do it, is I'm typically gonna look at it and say, okay. So somebody that, think of it this way, somebody that will buy in this area may not buy over in this area. Meaning, or I probably might have said that backwards. The people who are gonna buy here might say, I want to be east of Bangor Highway. I don't want to be west of Bangor. Or the Mountain View corridor, or I-15 here, like I try to segment it based on just kind of
Big boundary line.
boundary lines that way, does that make sense?
I I agree with that, that I would use that or other terrain features. So like the South Valley Regional Airport, based on how close you are to that, might change it completely, or any of the various parks.
Perfect.
Like, or just basing it off of subdivisions if they exist.
Okay, perfect, good. So just for the sake of ease, though, I agree with what you're saying. Just for the sake of ease, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, let's draw this based on kind of just this. And we'll follow along Bangor Highway here. Down into about this area. We're gonna come over to Mountain View Corridor and follow along it as well. Okay, so we're gonna say that's our area, okay? And I want to get the same style of house, so I'm just gonna say, and again, we might want to include 2-story just based on what we did before, but I'm not going to. And then I'm gonna say we want number of days back. I'm gonna do 90 days back in that area. I'm gonna come down here and we're gonna do. Year built was 93, so let's say from 1990 to. Not more than 99. Square footage, we'll do the same thing we did. Okay, so there are 5 properties in the last 90 days that have sold that match that criteria. Let's see if it's the same 5 that we already had.
One of them, right?
So on this though, now notice though, we don't have our lowest is a 459 here. Well, 453, I guess, is the sold price.
Oh, it is.
Did that change your feelings a little bit?
Little bit.
So,
You're still at 450? Okay. Okay, so but that's more how I would do it is, and again, to really, I'm not gonna take the time to do it right now, but really I would go look at those 5 to see. I want to find the ones that are the most comparable. And even if there's only 1 or 2, I'm trying to, and here's what my thinking is. The mindset that I'm trying to get into with this is I'm trying to get into, had our property been listed for sale in the last 90 days, would one of the people who chose these, the actual buyers who chose these houses, would have they been chosen ours had it been on the market, and at what price? Do you follow?
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay, so that's kind of the mindset that I'm trying to get into here. So we're saying here a 516 on the high end and 453, which again, I would go through and really look at these to narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3 or 1 even, to figure out what is the most comparable. Then we're gonna come back to here and I'm gonna do this. Now, this one, don't let me lose you. So now this one, we only got 2. Now, here's where my mindset goes on this. On this, now on these ones, you're gonna see there's a 420 and a 445. So again, I would go look at these to see, are they still comparable? But here's what I actually am gonna start to think of. Is what this is telling me, and what I'm trying to see is in the last 3 months, which actually I might even do less than that. I'm gonna change this up on you real quick. I'm gonna change this to 45 days. Because I want to even get closer to current. So I'm gonna first go back to the solds here. So in the last 45 days, 1 has sold and it was 475. Did we look at this one? Wow, yeah, way updated, way nicer, right? Okay. And I want to see the under contracts, which there was 2, which is going to be those same 2. All right, so here's what this has told me. In the last 45 days, there have been 3 buyers for our property. So how many should there be in the next 45 days then?
Probably more.
Why more?
Well, usually, well, I think interest rates are coming down in April, and I'm seeing with my listings right now that the buyers are starting to come back into the marketplace again.
Okay.
I also see a reduction of the inventory that's out there. So in my opinion, things are gonna start.
Okay, so you'll think there'll be more, okay?
I do,
Okay.
I'm not of the mindset.
So here's how I approach it. What I typically want to look at is my assumption is going to be that we're going to have the same number of buyers in the next 45 days as we had in the last. Now, could that change as meaning like that if interest rates came down 100%, that's going to make a big difference. The other thing that can control it is all of a sudden when the market gets flooded with properties for sale, that's going to control it in the opposite direction. So part of what we're trying to see here is, but I just go with the assumption that nothing's going to change. Okay, so therefore there are going to be 3 buyers in the next 45 days. Well, what that means to me is they're going to be then looking at what in that same general area, how many properties are for sale? Well, there's only 2. So really, we've got our property plus one other. So at this point, I would want to be looking at saying this one is our biggest competition that we have out there. Oh, wait, why did ours not show up? What did I do wrong? Ours should have shown up.
I think that listing didn't show it as a tri-level too, so it should have shown up.
There we go. I had the 45 days in, that's what messed it up. Let me see. Yeah, because it's been on longer than that. Okay. So ultimately, what I want to do is if our assumption is in the next, so what I'm saying to you guys is this. If 45 days from now, you and I got back together and we said, okay, we're going to redo this exact same thing. What properties would then be showing as sold and or under contract? And what we're looking at then is I'm trying to figure out which of these 4, because if you stop and think about it, going back to really what Aubrey said is you got some buyers out there that are just like, we just need a house for our family. These are their choices. And so therefore, which one of these houses is going to be the next one to go under contract? And I don't mean specifically which one, but in general, which one is going to go under contract next? What do you guys, I don't know if I'm asking that question good, but go ahead.
So I mean, we nobody knows that.
Right.
So of course, like I said, but I think the one that's priced.
The one.
You're close.
Yeah.
You're close. I would say it is the one that the buyers perceive to be the best value.
Okay, there you go.
So I wouldn't necessarily say it's based on the lowest price, but it's the which. So really for me, here's what I'm saying. If I were trying to decide what to list this home for sale for today, what I would be doing is looking at these comparables and saying which of these, what would make this house a good value? And I mean, how long has it been for sale? 33 days. Have they had any price changes?
No.
No. So what that tells me is the buyers already, because this is 33 days old on the market, the buyers have already said that's too high. That home is not worth the value, is what essentially they've said, right? Because otherwise, what should have happened?
Should have been.
And then I would say the same thing of this one. Our subject property, we're already at 459.9. I would say that based on that, what do we know?
Too high.
Too high. And then finally, this one at 455 has been 45 days or 41 days. Although they just reduced it from 465 6 days ago. Or no, not 6 days ago, since the 6th, what's today? 10 days ago, I guess, right? 11 days ago. Something like that. So I guess what I'm getting at with you guys is, I would say for me on this particular property. I think based on the condition, I mean, just look at this subject photo even. It's not great, like, so. To me, I think this one needs a significant price reduction. And I would say, more than that, 425 maybe-ish, I don't know. Is that what you said, Rita?
Yeah, but Russ. So, how come the one that was 435 in West Jordan didn't show up in that criteria? Because that's the one that I think. is gonna go first.
So because it was older, it was in 1986.
Oh,
And
right,
I'm,
you did.
when I did this, I did a bigger area, but closer to the year built, the square footage, all that kind of stuff. So
Right, I forgot about that.
anyway. All right. Thoughts, comments, questions, Lisa?
Why would you value the location more?
Because I'm not an appraiser. I'm just kidding.
I'm just asking.
I'm just teasing. When you say that, what do you mean by what, why don't I value the
You
location?
put location is your number one criteria as far as choosing homes.
Well, so why wouldn't I or why did I?
Like, why
Oh,
wouldn't you?
because again, in this scenario, I'm trying to think like a buyer, and buyers don't go out and stay within this small confined area usually. Usually they're looking in, like, we want to be somewhere out, well, and somewhat honestly, it's based on, here's what we can afford and what can we get for our money. And so therefore, that's the area we're not gonna go look in.
And aren't you
Unless-
still just determining a value?
But yeah, the way I'm doing it though is just saying, okay, where this house is at, I want to see the area that a buyer's probably going to be looking at. What can they get for their money? And truth is, I could have done the whole Salt Lake Valley and really honed in to be more, like I could have gone into the whole Salt Lake Valley and said, I want homes that have a square footage up here of between 400 and 600 or maybe 700. And like really detailed it out to see in the whole Salt Lake Valley, trying to find what did a buyer pay for a home that was really close to this one. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, kind of.
Because then I could see, okay. Based on that, in Sandy, they paid X amount for it, therefore it's gotta be less in that area or whatever, so.
Hey Russ, I have a question.
Yes,
At what point do we take into account the size of the lot?
yeah, good question. So that actually, and I didn't pay as close of attention as I was looking through the properties. And partially in this scenario, I didn't because I already know that they're all pretty close. But yeah, I would say that would be one of the things as you go through and look at it, is you are wanting to make sure you're not looking at a third of an acre versus a fifth right here. But I would say most of these were reasonably about the same. All right, any other questions? Okay, thanks for being here. So just a reminder that the next class is Thursday, and we're gonna go through the REPC. So we're gonna do just kind of going through in more detail some of the sections of the REPC. So there's 2 different REPC classes. Don't forget that as part of this, because part of what the division requires for the 12 hours of CE is we have to spend 4 hours, which they consider an hour to be 50 minutes, so an hour and 40 minutes. We have to spend an hour and 40 minutes twice on the REPC. So that's why, so don't think when you see, oh, I already did that one. There's 2 of them, okay? So just remember, be here every Tuesday and Thursday for the next 3 weeks and you'll be good.
Do you have a copy?
At 11.
Should we bring
Of what?
reps?
Oh, I'll put one up here. You can bring one if you want, for sure. All right,
Thanks, Russ.
thank you all for being here.
And I'm done with credit.
Thanks, Russ.
Did you lose credit?
Yeah, I put that for a second. Flying. Oh, you did, okay.
You just have to be it for 9.
So I.
Oh,
I
okay.
can-
9 minutes. Yeah, you.
Number 3. Yeah, so it's the beach down in the school district. But there's 3 criteria. Value. That's what that is saying. But. No, but you'll have an advantage, so because, when you're doing comps, you're gonna be coming from a much smaller